right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. We're still talking about the COP27 resolutions and what's in it for Kenya and the other interventions on climate action and climate change as well. Mr. Peter Odhengo is still here with us, climate finance expert and co-convener AFDAN. And Mr. Nicholas Abuya is also here with us, Global Program Resilience Advisor at Christian Aid, and Dr. Nancy Omolo, Gender and Climate Change Expert. Let's see what you're saying online before we continue this conversation. I'd like to hear from one Mr. Odhengo on how FLOCA worked out, and we'll explain to us what FLOCA really is. Let's bring that up and see what you're saying. Engineer Lazaro says government should account for every coin Kenya receives from development partners, UN and other NGOs as part of combating climate change. Combating climate change isn't only planting trees. Let's be clear, okay? Let's see what else you're saying here. Gumba Steve says, now that Kenya topped in sending the highest number of representatives to COP27, I hope they lobbied, and just as we topped that, we also top in the goodies we get as pertains the climate change. Otherwise, it will appear like we wasted time, okay? Wanyela Evans says, I doubt if the COP27 resolutions will be implemented. The government hasn't yet put in place measures to implement those same resolutions, all right? Mr. Odhengo, are those comments true, that the concerns that Kenyans are raising there?
Oh, great. Some of the comments are valid.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, Kenya, we are ahead on the game. Because even when we come down at the national level, what has been said here? Number one, we always learn that what comes from the international community has to be domesticated to realize the results. Yeah. And that is how we came up with financing locally led climate action. Note, we are the only country in the world that has demonstrated under financing how to devolve climate finance from global, continental, national, up to now, county, sub-county, up to the world. Once they will release the first resources from FLOCA, which is well designed with the theory of change. You know, in order to access this money, there is what is called innovation and the theory of change, and you know where you take these resources. Look at this. First of all, within our NDC, adaptation is the priority. But when you look at the resource allocation, 70% is going to mitigation. You see contradiction there, what Abuya was talking about, in the NDC, National Determined Contribution. But when you see the design of FLOCA, with the knowledge that the front line is at the world level, and it is the convention, United Nations Convention on Climate Change, requires that, Article 9 requires that climate finance should be devolved in scale, it should be predictable, it should be taken to where it is needed. Number one, for the entire FLOCA is a 1.05 billion US dollars over a 10-year period. As at now, almost 200 million has been mobilized. Now, of that, because of the climate justice that we talk about, when you could hear a lot of write-up justice, we had already made the justice locally here. Because now, in all the 47 counties, each county is entitled to at least approximately 12 million Kenya shillings per year for the next 4 years. That for institutional support, because we talked about here saying that the local people requires capacity building, training, climate information, getting those. That is institutional support alone. Then there is now what is called climate investment grant, which is approximately 120 million per year for 4 years. Now, if you take that, it has already captured in the convention that the county has already known that for the next 5 years, they are entitled to about 300 or 400 million climate finance, direct. All the 35 wards already knows that they need to have a project, whether it is, and particularly adaptation, 70% of it adaptation. And within that 132 million, they know that 30% has to go to women-led and women and youth-led projects. So we have already catered for gender and the youth in that money for the next 4 years. And this, as that one is going on, there is a team going on for the mobilization of additional. So when loss and damage come with the transition coming in, The country that is going to be ready and to implement the most of the COP27 is Kenya. And that is where now AFDAN comes in. AFDAN is Africa Green Climate Fund, National Designated Authorities Network. This network now means that countries are crying out that Kenya is crowding them out of resources. But now we said we are very just. Let's come together and share with you our counterparts on how we did it. Bangladesh is coming here in January to see how we manage to design what is workable. When Dr. Molo said that the governors are saying they are ready, and when I said that there was a weak governance leadership at the local level, we're already fixing it. Because now, what do you need in fixing governance? You first need a legislative framework, a law. There is now Climate Change Act in all these 43 counties. There is a climate change policy. There is a climate change fund at the subnational level. Then there is a climate change local committees which will be prioritizing those projects. Then the fund is not there that you write a proposal in a manner of a kind of a CBO, right? Google tape. Now, people sit down, the communities with the committee and with the technical assistance guide the local people because the requirement of their wards are totally different from the 47 counties. So they prioritize, and then they just fix that one, and then it is brought, and then it is financed. And the money goes to the service provider, and it is an incentive scheme. The incentive scheme means that you are incentivized. You have your money. The money is allocated for that county. And you have to show, because the counties are also contributing about 20% of their money. They first use that to indicate that they can use that, and then we release you that. So that incentive makes it a very good way of making the local people to work on themselves. COP27 resolutions, we will meet them. And there is a gentleman asking, how much did we lobby? We cannot talk about figures because we may be accused of big figures which are not seen. But let me assure you, there are a lot of resources that will be following. Even when you look at carbon credits, the carbon credits which we can, a lot is coming in. Let us get organized. Let the county governors take the lead of the locally led climate action. Let us talk with one voice at the national level and then command the continent so that Kenya is the best destination for green economy, low carbon emission, and adaptive capacity to show that adaptation works and the private sector has to put money in adaptation.
Is there a model county that you'd say has performed impressively when it comes to FLOCA?
Great. You know, FLOCA is a scale-up of what Nicholas and other consortium have been piloting over the last almost 10 years.
Yeah.
Yes, McQueen County has always been standing out, and that is where a locally led action has been tested. McQueen Isiolo, that he also talked about. And it is that same model that we had to pick and modify in scale and nationwide, because originally there were 5 counties for 10 years. Abuya, you also have to tell us. They have been piloting the locally led action for 5 counties for 10 years. Yeah. But FLOCA came in with 1 year and scaled up that one from 5 to 43 within 9 months. Yes. So you see that now that. So it means that the success of McQueen has been scaled up locally. Yeah. And now it is a follow-up, and if you look at how people are moving. But it is not McQueen alone. Go to Tana River. Go to Taita Taveta. Go to Kitui. And Kisumu, my county, is also coming up very well. Look at the LREB now team. Yeah. Because it is Abuya and the team that trained them on that one. Yes, we have a case to show the world that it is working. Yeah.
Abuya, now that you've been mentioned widely, what were the challenges when you tried to implement the locally led action plan?
Yeah. Trevor, maybe just picking it out from where Peter's left it, I would say that, yes, we piloted devolved climate financing in Kenya under the Adaptation Consortium. And definitely we have to thank our development partners, including FCDO, who supported us in that initiative. But I would say that what we did was more or less like what John the Baptist did. Mm-hmm. It was the forerunner.
Yeah.
So we laid the ground, and now that process has been institutionalized and taken up by the government, scaling it out all the 47 counties. Mm-hmm. Most of the times, they say that pilots always, the pilot kind of projects succeed, but they never go to scale. Yes. I think the devolved climate finance mechanism in Kenya, dubbed the County Climate Change Fund mechanism, is a pilot which was successful and now is going to scale. Okay. So we are waiting for FLOCA now to transfer the funds to the counties, and of course there is a lot of work going on in terms of readying the counties to receive the funds.
What would you say were the challenges during that period?
Definitely, there have been many challenges, of course, as he has pointed out. Lack of legal and institutional framework so that climate finance can flow from the global sources, for example, the national level, to the counties and then to the front line. Yeah. So what the County Climate Change Fund mechanism, which now is being scaled out through the FLOCA program, through the Government of Kenya initiative now with the other development partners has done, is that we are put in place policy and legislative framework at the counties, which also create institutions at the world level, a critical institution known as the World Climate Change Plan Committees, through which now climate finance can be channeled, being received at the national level, then going to the counties and actually getting its way to the communities at the world level, where, for example, what is prioritized as adaptation or mitigation can be acted upon. So that has been the major kind of problem in terms of making climate finance work for those who are facing climate crisis. But having said that, allow me to really speak about the subject of climate justice, because that is where I come from. Yeah? We are saying that money is important, finance is important, but we must actually have empathy and demonstrate solidarity with those who are vulnerable. When we do that, we ensure that climate finance that is provided is not only flexible to work for those who are vulnerable and facing the challenges of climate change, but it's also accessible and it's also predictable. So that's something which is very important. Yeah. And that's why I said at the outset that it is not just about quantity, but also quality.
Okay. Dr. Mola, I'd like to bring you in on this. When you deal with the women in the different villages, I'm insisting on what the challenges are because most of them say they have no idea what to do. What do they tell you is the main concern, according to them? What is the challenge, especially the women you deal with?
All right. Thank you very much, Trevor. And from your statement that most women say that they don't know what it is, I think when we go down to at the community level, first of all, when you ask them, what is climate change? Sometimes they're not able to tell you what climate change, whether you are in Turkana, whether you are in Makueni, you have to translate what climate change means in the local language. So most of the time they'll talk about drought or they'll talk about floods. So, for example, when we went, we did some research in Turkana, and we asked them, what changes have you seen in the weather, maybe in terms of drought? Then they'll say that, before drought used to come after 10 years, but now every year they're facing drought. And they don't know what they've done to their gods. That's what they say. But also, when Kenya Meteorological Department do the modeling 40 years, maybe from 1963, then they find that before, drought used to happen after a long period of time, and now it's almost happening on a yearly basis. And if also they do modeling in the future, then they see that drought will recur more kind of frequently. And also when you go to certain part of the country, they'll tell you that the weather has changed. The weather is strange because the rains come when they don't want them. And when they want the rains don't come. So from this kind of conversations, it shows that the community is aware that there are some changes happening in their environment. But also we are very interlinked in this climate change. That's why when you told me that you're bringing in Odhengo and you're bringing in Nicholas, I was like, oh, I know them, because under the Adaptation Consortium, I was also a technical advisor under a big program, which was the Stack Plus program, but then it was funded by the DFID, which is now FCDO, that's the UK funding, and also the DAI. So I had the opportunity to go and evaluate. I was evaluating all the programs which are under the Stack Plus, and Adaptation Consortium was one of them. And I went to Isiolo, but one of the innovations that now they're having is called public participation. So when you go to, I'm hearing people saying that, oh, you're only talking about trees, but even that trees that everyone keep on saying that when you talk about climate change, we're doing trees, are they doing it the right way? Are they growing fruit trees? Do they know the trees that they need to grow locally? Are they growing trees for firewood and all that? But here is a case where we're talking about water management. So when we went here where Adaptation Consortium was working, they asked community, how do you want to manage your water resources? And they say that they have this dam here, and this dam is polluted because it's not fenced. So the cows come and they drink from the same one, and there's evaporation and there's mismanagement. And also women say that when they cook with this water, they get a lot of health-related diseases. So they ask, what do you want to do about this water? So they say, we want this water, first of all, to be fenced. After fencing, the pastoralist says, we want this water, we want you to build for us some traps so that the livestock can drink from this side. And the women said, we want also you to pump the same water on the other side so that we can have water kiosks. So eventually when we went here, we find kind of this setup. Because water was fenced, the pastoralists were happy, the male pastoralists, because their cows were drinking from there, and the women were happy. And actually, they were selling this water at a very low prices, and businesses were sprouting just around there. So it shows how community can come up with an idea on even how to manage their water. And also went to some part of Isiolo, and the community, when they were asked, what do you want in terms of climate change? And they said, we don't even have an FM radio station. So in Nairobi here, where you're spoiled, like you can have so many radio stations, this community had never had a radio station. And they say, when you have this radio station, then you can talk about climate change issues, you can talk about development issues. And Allah says, you cannot separate climate change issues from development. Development is climate change, and climate change is development. You have to integrate the two. So actually, we went there with the people from FCDO and all that. And the community was so excited, plus the chief, because we were launching the first FM radio station, and even just launching radio station where the community can have the right information to farm, to manage their livestock and all that. Because also sometimes when you talk about agriculture, we tend to talk about crop farmers. But when you talk about agriculture, we're talking about the fisher folks. And one of the biggest thing in climate change now is the blue economy. And also when we talk about agriculture, we're talking about the pastoralists, because 80% of this country is arid and semi-arid. So how do we manage that? So there are varied things. And that one, we've not even moved to the area of energy, because energy is mitigation under climate change. We're in a country where we have 10% of forest cover. And you find that over 60% of the population is still using firewood. So how do counties going to transition into green energy?
All right. And Mr. Odhengo, I like the direction that Dr. Molo is taking, because now those are the practical things that are being seen on the ground. Under GCF, you mentioned, I think there are more than 15 projects there. What are they and what do they cover?
Oh, great. Let me just speak from where Dr. Molo has just left.
Yeah.
In 2018, one of the projects that has been funded by the Green Climate Fund is clean cookstoves. This clean cookstove is, the accredited entity is GIZ and F. And the total amount of this money is $58 million US. It is for 2 counties, Senegal and Kenya. Now, the objective of this was now to support the household energy transition from the use of dirty fossil fuels like firewood, which is causing deforestation and also causing emission, to a clean source of energy at the household level, where they were now given money to purchase or to subsidize the clean cookstoves. By the way, the GCF and climate finance has done quite a number of transformative technologies in this country. If you know the ban Jiko, you know Jiko Core, Yeah, Jiko is what we started with in 2013. And that is the best, highly efficient Jiko in the sub-Saharan Africa, award-winning Jiko. Where did it start from? We started with that piloting that Jiko here in industrial area, Area 1. Today, they are now manufacturing Jiko Kowa, Ban, Peter Scott, here in Ruiru. And it is the one supplying all East and Central Africa under carbon credit payment for those services. So climate finance has been working in three things. Number one, within the UN Convention, we have what is called the means of implementation. The means of implementation, number one, is climate finance. Number two is technology transfer. And number three is capacity building. Now, when you look at the Kenyan state, we've managed to transfer the clean technology to manufacture here clean cook stove. Let me take it at the grassroots level. And more than 1,000 people are working in that factory. Started here in industrial area and producing over 1 million clean cook stove per day. There are a number of rocket Jikos that are being manufactured by GIZ, where the local women have been trained to manufacture or to model all those things. So climate finance is here. It has been working. But as he says, the communication between the policy and the technical people and the local people is what is missing. That lack of awareness, I don't know whether to call it digital awareness or traditional, conventional awareness, but the new tech that they are using has been contributed as part of that. And the development partners, although sometimes we accuse them of not honoring them, FCDO now, the former DFID, DFID, has done a lot in nurturing these technologies and providing seed money to enable the local communities subsidized to get those new tech, the green technology, environmental friend, which they would have not. The market price for Jiko, for example, Ban Jiko, is almost 5,000 if it is not subsidized. But because of carbon credit and climate finance, it has been selling at 2,900 and whatever. Why? So that my grandmother can afford it. And how do we get that? That is what is climate finance. Climate finance is not every money that you receive for planting trees or anything. No. It is money that is over and above, that is required to build a resilient society. It is money over and above that will make your camera more resilient when the temperature in this room rises beyond the normal so that your camera cannot melt. Whatever the cause of the camera you have, that is not climate finance. It's normal. But if you have a better camera, I'm giving this, Trevor, because the understanding and the translation of what climate finance is very, very important. Not everything is climate finance. There is development, or even the weather itself, climate change over 30 years period. But within that, with or without these anthropogenic actions, emission, weather will always change. But what causes the weather to change faster is because of our human activities that are burning these fossil fuels. But let me also clarify here. I hear people coming talking about mitigation. What is mitigation in the terms of climate change? The mitigation in terms of climate change is different with the mitigation in terms of mitigating risk in finance or mitigating risk in a building that is being designed. Mitigation in the context of climate change means that you have the technology that minimizes, reducing, or avoiding the emission of greenhouse gas emission. This greenhouse gas emission, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, and that. Why do we need to mitigate their emission? Simply because they cause that heating near the terrestrial, causing the rising of temperature. So when you hear that people want to run around here to mitigate a company, because Kenya is only emitting 0.3% of the total global greenhouse gas emission. Now, if you want to mitigate 0.3%, of the total greenhouse gas emission in the world. Even if you do it at 180%, what are you going to contribute into that? When you hear a company bragging around that we are going to be net zero because we have changed from solar to, we have changed from fossil fuel to a solar in that. And then when you quantify that one in the Kenyan context of the nationally determined contribution, it is negligible. China alone is emitting almost 78%. Because they're selling us. America used to lead by emitting 75% of the total, almost more than half of the global total greenhouse gas emission. These are the guys who are supposed to reduce that. But because we are living in a warmer earth, as he has said, we have to make sure that that person in the front line who is lacking water, because when you are warming, when you live in a warmer planet, there is higher evaporation, and the water is not enough. You know, the next war will be water. So we need to make sure that either that person or that livestock or that crop is less water tolerant. Yeah. We need to change our rice growing systems in Ahero, in Western, because there is no water. So you have to transit from rice varieties that are not using flooding water. If you're using irrigation, now you need to finance that transition to, for example, drip irrigation. That is why the Israelis are ahead of us. That is why the River Nile in Egypt, where we were not along the River Nile, but Samal Sheikh is very far in the desert. But they are still selling, their food is very cheap. Their fruits are very fresh and nice because they are using the finite River Nile water effectively, efficiently to produce food for the livelihood of the people. These are the adaptive capacity that we have to put in place. But what do they need? Yeah. Money.
So our focus should be adaptation and not mitigation.
Correct. Yeah. Correct.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, Trevor, I wanted to pick it from there really. I'll not fail to mention about one disappointing outcome of COP27 in relation to mitigation that Odhengo has talked about.
Yeah.
From COP26, remember, it was agreed that we were pushing towards phase out, or particularly coal and fossil fuels. Then along the line, a compromise was reached. The text was changed to read
down.
Face down. So we want to see incremental progress, which is transformational, not tokenism. Unfortunately, at the COP27, they more or less copy-pasted what was arrived at COP26 on mitigation by just retaining the same text of facing down fossil fuels for the developed countries because they bear the historical responsibility for causing climate change and they are the leading polluters. We must hold these countries accountable. They should actually increase or enhance their mitigation ambitions. Because even adaptation has got limits. Odhengo knows this. That's why there's loss and damage. So even if they agree on the loss and damage funding, how much can they fund when they continue polluting? It means that the scale of loss and damage will accelerate beyond the capability of any developed country or a coalition of developed countries really to support. We need to see increased mitigation ambition. And therefore, the outcome of COP27 on mitigation was disappointing, I have to say so. They even went further to include as text to the extent that there is going to be increased investment on renewables, including less polluting energy. You see now, when they include a text to that effect, we might actually, it might be a floodgate to bringing back dirty energy as being classified as less polluting in future. That was quite disappointing. Now you can understand why I said from the beginning that I've got a stubborn optimism. But of course there was a breakthrough on loss and damage. Coming home about energy provides us with an opportunity to enhance our adaptation. But I'll always remain on my baseline of climate justice. Energy access means a lot, yeah, and provides potential for enhanced adaptation and even mitigation for our country and for the world.
Yeah.
But that's not enough. At local level, what we want to see is energy which is not only affordable, but is also reliable, is clean, is safe, is modern. In Kenya, we have had a very massive kind of electrification, yeah? The last mile, you know about it.
Yeah.
Let us give credit where it is due. It has taken electricity access to areas which were dark at sunset. So if I go to my rural village, somewhere in Kisii, South Mugrango, I can, in the evening at sunset, I can see light in the shopping center. Before, it was darkness until morning. That is good. But for sure, how many people in that my rural village, after the electricity was taken there, have connected to that electricity and are using it for different functions, including lighting or even cooking, etc., etc. Very few. Why? Because it is not affordable. So we must address these things from the understanding of equity as well.
Yeah.
And therefore, we are not going to take what is prescribed as solutions which don't really address our problems. Okay. So energy access is important, but it needs to be affordable, reliable, clean, safe, and modern.
Okay.
Otherwise, we will not achieve the desired transformation in terms of adaptation and mitigation when that is not realized.
Yeah. And Dr. Molo, you were in Sharm el-Sheikh. What happened there? We are saying is a bit disappointed with some of the outcomes there. Was it that there was no one to lobby, or was it just ignored because the superpowers were bulldozing their way?
I like that. And just before going that, this week when we came from Sharm el-Sheikh, I saw this nation writing that, you know, Kenya sent one of the big delegation. You know, I think it was the 4th in the world. And they talk about these government people going to get per diems. And I look at it and I'm like, what do you mean? Because I had the government list of people who went. First of all, when we got to that negotiations, we have the people who are going as party and we have observers. So if you're accredited under the government, you're a party. So this list of government, there are government people who are funding themselves. There are NGOs, international organizations, who are also in this kind of list. And there are also people in the government who've raised their own funds to go there. And I think Kenya was very well prepared to go to these negotiations because we had several meetings in Nairobi whereby if you're negotiating under the adaptation, you know, there were groups and they came up with, you know, what is the Kenya position. We also had people who are just under, you know, climate finance, just, you know, this is the Kenya position. We had people negotiating under gender and climate change. So we all had all those kind of presentations. I think Kenya was one of the countries which was well prepared, and this was coordinated by the Ministry of Environment Climate Change Directorate. And for the first time, I was in a meeting in Nakuru, even with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I asked them, what are you doing here? And I'm like, no, when these negotiations are going on, after you come from the Sharm el-Sheikh, it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs which takes it over. And you had all the Ministry of Land, you know, everywhere. So when we went to this conference, I think we were really well prepared, and I didn't see anyone who was looking like they're per diem and just going shopping. Kenyans were very busy. Either they were in the negotiation rooms, and by the time that you had a break, they were going to side events. We had a very big WhatsApp, and I'm really glad that that WhatsApp is going to be run up to the COP28. And there someone was saying, now I'm on this platform, I'm presenting this, and someone is saying, we are coming. So at a time, there were 10 presentations going on. So Kenyans really worked hard. And I think the kind of civil servants you have at the moment, they're very different. They want to deliver, and they really know what they want. And whether you had the civil society, as civil society, we move on. Today you're working under with the Christian aid adaptation, that tomorrow you're an advisor to the government. So one of the things we said, that actually the civil society in Kenya and the Kenya government were working hand to hand. And I talked to somebody who was in loss and damage, and they said that that success which was there, as Kenyans who were there, we really lobbied hard for them. So I believe that Kenyans really made a contribution. And when we went there, when we were well prepared, I think as a country we should be proud of what we did at Sharm el-Sheikh.
But just let me add something small on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing which we need to know as a country, Americans are taking more than 1,000, and they go in shifts. And they are in all those sessions, and sessions run up to the middle of the night. Countries with very few delegates always don't know even what is going on. because they are tired. People are staying very far away. It is all not ways. It is not all along about per diem. Now look. Before we went to Samalasek, I just want to strengthen that. We were in Windhoek, Namibia. And a presentation was being made by a South African lady, virtually. The lady did not know that a Kenyan, Odhengo, was there. And the lady presented how Kenya is taking all the money, climate finance flow. In fact, in 2021, the total climate finance flow to Africa, which was 7% of that, we are very lucky to be having about 2 to 3% of that, if we put the total amount of the amount that is coming in. Now, take about 2 people with per diem of Samal is nothing. It's not like it's not like Washington, D.C. or Geneva. It's 1,000 of less than 500 of USD. And count which investment can give you $1 billion US when you invest $200. So the good thing, I think what we will do, part of locally led action, we will have a very serious training to our journalists to be climate green champion journalists, simply reporting on this thing. Okay. So that we have a very well coordinated digital alert team that is not looking for, but I was not paid by the government. I was a party negotiating on climate finance and representing the county, but I was not paid a DSA by the government. She was not. Oh, I know so many of my people. The team from the Ministry of Environment, there were very few. And even the line technical ministers could not go because of a few challenges here and there. It is not about, some of the Kenyans also came from abroad. I know colleagues from Connecticut University who are being part of the party. And the coordination from the Ministry of Environment was excellent. Every day people were coordinating. So that is why we are getting in. And that is why I said, governance at the national level and coordination is very good. But when we go to down, even our governors who came, the 4 governors who attended, really, really, we appreciate them. During the launch, they came and they represented Kenya. Kenya is a powerhouse. Anybody who can talk, we can take them and see how we are. So please, thank you for this.
Dr. Mulo, you're finishing.
And something which is very important is decision making, either at the international level, the national level, and at the local level. And one of the things I realized when I was there, Japanese brought a lot of their young people, and they were taking questionnaires. So, you know, they're starting training young people because we're in a generation, we're going to age. But how do we ensure that we have a training, a mentorship, whereby we take young university Kenyans so that, you know, they go to the COP. I saw Ghana, and Ghana, one of the person who was chairing the Ghana delegation told me every COP he brings 6 young people and he was training them. This is the session. These are the places you need to do. So we need to really mentor young people and take them there. The only thing I like with the Nation article is that they had disaggregated data that this big delegation that Kenya sent, actually women were less than the men, you know. Although one thing I realized that even the women who were there at the COP were all in different adaptation, loss and damage and everything. But now this decision making at the COP level has been very important because COP25, we say that they are looking at increasing the number of women to the COP. So COP26, they increased the number of women. So when we are in COP27, we're saying we don't just want to increase the number. How is the participation of women influencing the decision making at this place? And also when we go to the local level, and we talked about county climate change funds, one of the things which was very interesting that county climate change fund at the local level, for example, when they worked in a place like Isiolo, they insisted that the youth and the women have to participate, and they had such laws. And this is a community whereby sometimes the young people cannot talk in front of the older men, and the women cannot talk. So as an outcome of implementation of this project, you had women and youth eventually were part of these committees, and some came out to be politicians after doing all those kind of things. Some transformed to being teachers. So participation and decision making is very important in terms of climate change. That's something that I just wanted to put across, because women have always been leaders even at the community level. In terms of environment, we've seen women leading. In terms of preachers and teachers, and even the youth have led in, you know, even in the democracy of this country. So wherever we're going to do in the climate change, we have to ensure that it's inclusive.
Okay. I have to take some quick feedback, and then I'll come back to all of you to take closing remarks on what is the central message you're sending to the government and to the people as well who are listening this morning. Let's see some of the feedback on what you're saying here. Godi Baraza says the government should ensure that every department finds it necessary to observe the COP27 resolutions for preparedness in terms of the globally changing weather patterns. We have every reason to adhere to the resolutions arrived at. Okay? Let's see if we can fit in maybe one or two more. The COP27 resolutions must be made mandatory for every county to carry out. Climate change information must be simplified. In fact, I think that is the greatest tweet I've seen so far. Climate change information must be simplified and be available to every farmer and all institutions associated with environmental affairs. All right? And Sawe says the old and those people in the rural areas need more information about climate change for them to understand and reap the benefits of all this climate finance. Set aside funds for civic education. This will bring everyone on board. Benefit will be realistic. This is the part that I think is the biggest failure there. Civic education and awareness. Because my grandmother at the village has no idea what the billions you're talking about here, Abuya, as you make your closing remarks.
Okay, thank you, Trevor. As I make my closing remarks, is that definitely we are looking forward to the implementations of the resolutions made at COP27, particularly the breakthrough on loss and damage. A transition committee is in place. It will work about the modalities of access, how the funds that goes to that kitty will be raised, and many others. So we are very keen on that, given that loss and damage is a reality for us. Then coming quickly to respond to the feedback that we are receiving, I would really urge all the county governments in Kenya to work and accelerate the process of meeting the minimum access conditions of the FLOCA funds, so that finance can flow to the front line. And some of this finance will be used to raise awareness and sensitize the communities at the front line, particularly the ward level, where perhaps your grandmother can be reached. Yeah. And my mother, of course, somewhere in a rural Kisii. Yeah? I think if we do that, then we'll be able to demonstrate to the world that mechanisms exist which can channel climate finance to the front line, including the yet to be developed loss and damage finance facility. I believe that the devolved climate financing mechanism in Kenya, with institutional framework from the national to the county, even up to the ward level, is a good example which can be used to channel climate finance, including the anticipated loss and damage finance, to go to the front line. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Dr. Molo, closing remarks.
All right. Yes, thank you so much. I think I'm very optimistic about the COP27, the loss and damage, setup of the funds. It's going to be a long process, but I'm very glad that we've started the talk. And since we've, the farmers, the pastoralists, the fisher folks, they're really feeling the impact of the climate change. But after having this talk at the international level, we've had this talk at the national level, what is important that how can this transform the livelihood of that 80-year-old woman at the village, of that marginalized young girl, of that differently abled man at the village level? And I think as counties are preparing with these policies, I tell them that they need to go beyond preparing these policies. For example, if we're to come with funds today, do they know all the community-based organizations working at the local level? Do they know the youth groups and what they're working on? So counties still need to organize themselves to receive this money and to have kind of a higher impact. And it's very much true that we also need to have a lot of civic education, because a lot is happening at the ground level, but maybe we're not talking about it. So I believe that we're in the right path, and if we continue on this way and get much more commitment at the local level, then we are going to have the real transformation.
All right. Mr. Odhengo, closing remarks.
Money alone is not a means to an end. The governors at the county level have got the highest responsibility now to replicate what the national government has done. We are giving them now the chance to take the leadership in ensuring that climate finance reaches the last mile in a household with very simple things, either water, electricity, medicine, and information. We have, Kenya, we are very lucky. We have IGAD, ICPAC, KMD, the best in the region providing information. Loss and damage is a good thing. The national level must start moving to come up with loss and damage action plan with the budget, so that when the transition committee finishes their work, there are already 2 countries that have already committed their resources. That is Denmark and France. We need those money now because we have a system and loss always occur at the front line where we are already there with our FLOCA funds. We are in a better position. Let's move together and educate our people. And green champions are already there in all the 47 counties. Those people are trained. They are members of the village. Please use the green champions at your ward level to make this transition move and retain Kenya's #1 position, Kenya forever.
How do they know who these green champions are?
The green champions are like disciples of Jesus Christ. Just let them just go into the market and ask, who is a green champion? They will rise and they will guide them. They are not supposed to be known. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for making time for us this morning. Mr. Peter Odhengo, climate finance expert and co-convener of Africa Green Climate Fund National Designated Authorities Network, which is AFDAN. Asante sana for making time. Nicholas Abuya, Global Program Resilience Advisor at Christian Aid. Thank you so much for making time. And Dr. Nancy Omolo, gender and climate change expert. You know, even the Holy Book says, my people perish for lack of knowledge. If you have a good idea out there, find out how it can be enhanced. It's a global world today. If you have any idea that deals with climate change, find out how it can be enhanced. You can always reach any of us here on Twitter as well, at Trevor Mbija, at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. It's Friday. DJ Gigi is taking over the decks, all right? Enjoy your weekend. My name is Trevor Mbija. Bye for now.